organisms inherit their traits, period. Then there are things that are called mutations, for example, that change the genes, and those are inherited. In fact, you do need mentalism in order to have evolution. One of Darwin's problem was that, unfortunately, he didn't read Mendel's paper. The reason was because Mendel published in a very obscure journal. That's one of the problems that every scientist knows about. Never publish in an obscure journal, because then otherwise you're going to be forgotten for 30 years until after you're dead. Darwin, in fact, was looking for a mechanism of heredity. He needed a mechanism of heredity, and there is a chapter in The Origin of Species that actually says, this is one of the problems of my theory at this point. I don't know how heredity works. Well, now we do. That's the way science works.
Dr. Aldous Huxley, one of the world's leading evolutionists, once claimed that, quote, the reason that we, evolutionists, jumped at the idea of evolution was because we did not want a God interfering with our sexual mores, end quote. If evolution is purely science, please explain why Dr. Huxley would make such a statement. I can't attest to the veracity.
Yeah, you're the historian here. I'm not sure that Darwin actually ever said something like that. If he did, that's his own opinion. It's got nothing to do at all with the evidence for evolution, and which is entirely independent of the opinions and particular religious beliefs or ethical beliefs of any scientist. As I said before, scientists happen to have an enormous variety of religious beliefs. There are scientists of all sorts of religions or non-religions. So if I actually said that, and I'm really not sure, I suspect this is one of those examples, those cases like the alleged recantation of Darwin on his deathbed, which probably very likely didn't happen and was made up at the beginning of the century. You should know something about it because you wrote a book in which that is reported. So I suspect it's simply not true. But even if it is true, it doesn't make any difference. Any single evolutionary biologist can think that all he wants about morality, God, or any other topic that you like. It doesn't make you an expert in that area.
I have seen the quote. I don't remember where. I think I could find it, though, if the person who asked the question would like to contact me. I think it was Thomas Huxley who said, we've accepted Darwin's theory not because of the evidence, but because it gives us sexual freedom, something to that effect. I think I can find that. There's a book we have on the table out there called the Revised Quote Book. That their words may be used against them, which contains thousands and thousands of quotes from scientists from all the ages, and there's a CD in the back, which we can look at very quickly on that CD. Probably find it on there. Okay, so I think it's pretty obvious, if evolution is true, you have no basis to determine right from wrong. There's no absolute moral authority. If evolution is true, Hitler was right. Hitler was certainly trying to promote the evolutionary theory. You can read many folks who've written about him and say, yeah, that was his goal. I ask people this question all the time. Maybe you've got an answer, Dr. Debalucci. If evolution is true, how do we determine right from wrong? Where is the standard to determine right from wrong? If evolution is true. If evolution is true, the strongest survive. It's tooth and claw, struggle for life. And the biggest guy, wins. But if the Bible is correct, then God decides right from wrong. And some people don't like that idea because it chaps their heart.
Next question.
Get some Vaseline, man. You're going to need it. We'll be judged by God.
What is the purpose of the other planets and stars?
What is the purpose of the other planets and stars? I don't claim to know the answer. I have a couple ideas. I'm sure I'll get misquoted on this one too. The planets certainly do shield us from an awful lot of meteor strikes. I mean, if you take a look at the moon, obviously it took the hits for us quite a few times, as well as Mercury. I think maybe the stars and planets are out there for the oh wow factor. Why do people put chrome on their cars? People go, oh wow. I don't know. I know one thing, when I step outside and look at the stars and the planets, I say, wow, what a mighty God we serve. So that may be the purpose. It may just be because God's not broke. It doesn't cost him a thing to make it. He didn't even lift his finger to make it. He spoke. Everything in the universe was created by the voice of God. When he speaks, the waves lay down, the dead come to life. Everything obeys the voice of God, except some people. Okay?
A bunch of light bulbs up there and not waste all of that precious energy and matter. And by the way, how would you explain, based on that hypothesis, the fact that the overwhelming majority of stars are simply invisible? How would you go, wow, to something you can't see? Amen. Anyway, the question was the reason why the stars and planets are there. I don't know. Nobody knows if there is a reason. First of all, the question assumes that there is a reason. That may not be a reason. As far as I know, there may not be a reason. If there is a reason, it's certainly not something that an evolutionary biologist would ever be able to tell you, for one thing. You should ask it at most a cosmologist, and even a cosmologist I would think they would have some problems telling you anything about meaning. Science is not about meaning. Meaning you have to find it yourself. Science cannot give you that answer.
Next question. Monkeys evolved into humans as a result of unfavorable environments. Why do monkeys continue to exist?
The grandmother effect. I already answered that question. I think could we go to another one, or do you want to give an answer to that?
That's fine.
Please name some absolute evidence for evolution.
Absolute evidence for evolution. Well, I don't know even what that means, actually. Absolute. Well, I don't know. The fact that the HIV virus is changing under your very nose is pretty absolute to me. That is a kind. Yes, the virus hasn't turned into a banana yet, but nevertheless, it is evolving under your very nose. The fact that you might have problems getting infections because antibiotics have selected, by natural selection, for more and more resistant bacteria is another example of a pretty absolute. You can observe it yourself. The fact that you cannot spray any more pesticides in your garden and get it clean of pests because pests have evolved resistance, well, that's evolution happening under your very nose, so I consider that pretty convincing evidence. There's a lot more than that. You can look at the DNA similarity of organisms. The fact, how do we know that fungi and animals are more closely related to each other than either one of them is related to plants? Because if you look at their molecular structure, their DNA today, it is much more similar than either of them is to plants.
I would say there is no absolute evidence for evolution above the microevolution examples which I gave earlier. Now let me take the rest of my 1 minute on the stars. The Hubble telescope was asked to look for 10 days at one spot that they thought was black. After 10 days of viewing a spot about the size of a grain of sand held at arm's length above the Big Dipper, they discovered after analyzing the pictures there were more stars than they could count in that area. And I said the same thing. Wow. That's what I said a minute ago. That's for the oh wow factor. And it worked. Great. Thank you.
Your turn. If we all come from Adam and Eve and sons of Noah, how do we have different races?
How do we have different races? I guess, studying this for quite some time, I've come to the conclusion races is a bad term. We have different colors of people. I think it's very divisive to talk about different races. And I've got that answer on video. Like I said, I have 3,500 pictures. I can't call it up quickly. There are several different theories of where the different skin colors came from. I tend to believe probably the Tower of Babel after the flood is the most likely theory. About 200 years after the flood, there were probably a few thousand people in the world by then. And they were decided to build this tower, you know, and in spite of God's commands to get out and spread out and replenish the earth and all that stuff. And so they decided in rebellion to God to build this tower. God came down and confused their languages. The people had to go off then marrying somebody from their own family. Now, in the original creation, this would not be a problem with the pure genetic code. He married sisters with no problem. Adam married his rib with no problem. But after the flood, you would start to have problems, genetic problems, and today we have 3,500 defective genes, and it's just about genetic suicide to marry somebody closer than a first cousin. So probably after the flood, the Tower of Babel, they broke up, everybody speaking French went one way, everybody speaking Italian went someplace else, and the Germans, and et cetera, and they had to marry family. And under those conditions, like the Habsburg dynasty, you start to get some pretty weird-looking